All right, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Thanks for joining us today. We worked through a few technical issues just a few moments ago to get us up and running. One thing, everybody's on their phones right now, so finding a little bandwidth is a little difficult. And then the other thing is I need to push one last button to actually get this thing go to live. So all of that worked out now. We want to thank Kimley Horn for sponsoring today's webcast. And we'll just jump right into it. We'll have some opportunities to ask questions at the end. Please feel free to post questions at the comments portion of the page, and we will address that towards the end. Um, we can't see your hands. Please don't raise your hands. And with that, I will just hand this off to Marcia. And as we all know Marcia very well, she asked me not to give her a big glossy intro, so I won't do that and honor her request. So with that, we will turn things over here to Miss Marcia. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. And we're doing our social distancing thing here, so I was out in the hallway while Paul did the intro to make sure that we all stay safe. I hope you're all taking all the necessary precautions to keep yourselves safe as well. I'm really excited to be here with you today to tell you about what's going on here at MARTA. It's a very, very exciting time. The presentation I put together, I assembled before we all went into the virus mode. So through the course of the presentation, I'm also going to share a few highlights of what we're doing as an authority as part of our response to the current situation. So the first thing I want to do is share with you a little bit about the scope of MARTA. So some of you may be most familiar with the train part of our system, the rail part of our system. As you probably know, we have 38 stations in the system. We currently have over 300 rail cars. There are 3 different generations of cars. We are in the process of both doing a midlife update to some of our vehicles, rail vehicles, as well as starting the process for building new cars that over the next 7 years will be delivered to the authority. And so at the end of that period of time, we will have a brand new fleet. We have 570 buses, give or take a few. About half of them are buses that had the capability of allowing passengers to enter through the rear door, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The other half of our buses are actually in the process of being reprogrammed to allow that capability to happen. In response to the virus, it is very important that we continue to run service. For a lot of people, we are their only means of mobility. But to keep our operators safe, we are asking passengers to load through the rear of the bus. They will ride for free because the Breeze card reader is up by the operator. The only people who will use the front door are the operator and any of our accessibility passengers who still need the ramp to get onto the vehicle itself. We have about a $500 million a year capital program. And what I'm going to do through the balance of our presentation is talk a little bit about some of the major activities and programs that are have recently started or are coming on board in the next fiscal year. So while we're changing slides, we're also, I'll call it super sanitizing our rail system. The rail cars using technology that was shared with us by Delta Airlines. We are doing fogging inside of our trains to sanitize them, and the operator compartments are being sanitized at each end of the line. So every time they make a run, when they get to the end of the line, their cabin is re-sanitized. Ridership, as you can imagine, has dropped off dramatically. We're running about 70% below normal on the trains and about 50% below normal on the buses. Although, obviously, from a financial perspective, that's a problem. From our ability to continue to provide service, yet have people social distance appropriately, it's working pretty well. So we have two major areas of projects here at MARTA, programs and projects. We have what's known as state of good repair, which is taking care of what we have or enhancing what we have. And then we'll talk a little bit later about some of the expansion things that are going on that are a result of some of the new sales tax referenda that have been approved by some of our jurisdictions. For those of you who may not be as familiar with MARTA as some others, right now, DeKalb, Fulton, and Clayton counties and the city of Atlanta are our 4 jurisdictional partners. There, as you can imagine, there are a lot of conversations going on. There are others who are quite interested in being part of the system, and hopefully over time others will come on board for that purpose. So in the category of state of good repair projects, we have a lot of different kinds of things going on. I mentioned earlier that we have 38 rail stations. Each of the rail stations will be subject to a rehabilitation program. The budget for each station, with the exception of 2 that I'll describe momentarily, will be in the range of $10 to $15 million. It will be visual enhancements. It will be new tile, new paint. Each station needs something a little bit different, so we have consultants who have come on board who will go through a whole scope to determine what should be done at each station, with a big focus on improving the customer experience. The 2 stations that are not part of the standard rehabilitation are 5 Points and Airport. Airport, as you can imagine, is the gateway into Atlanta, and so where the other stations will receive about $10 to $15 million worth of improvements, the airport station will receive about a $30 million rehab program, one piece of which will include a canopy that is very similar to the new canopies that the airport has constructed over their thoroughfares. The 5 Points is going to see a major transformation both inside and outside. I'll talk about the outside a little bit later on, but the rehabilitation of 5 Points will start at the concourse level and then go down to both the east-west platform level and the north-south platform level. So that's a much larger rehabilitation program. System enhancements covers a wide range of both things that will be visible to our patrons, as well as many things that are the behind-the-scenes types of systems. And we'll talk about some of those in a little while. I mentioned the rail car programs. We have the rehabilitation programs ongoing. In fact, if you drive on I-85, some days you might see a train car on the back of a flatbed being brought back from our contractor, Kikashiro, who's based up in New Jersey. And we're getting regular deliveries of these upgraded rail cars. And then in a year or so, we'll start taking possession of some of the new rail car fleet. The new rail cars, it's a $646 million replacement program. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the technology things that we're doing here at MARTA. Paul, next slide, please. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned that we already have a number of jurisdictional partners. As we set up our systems and our programs, we always have an eye to the future to make sure that we're well prepared. So we've obviously there have been conversations over time with Gwinnett County. Others have come forward and have expressed interest. We are in regular conversation with the ATL. In fact, Chris Tomlinson is an ex officio member of the MARTA board, as is Russell McMurray. So we're trying to ensure that we're all talking with each other, we're all coordinating with each other, so that from the user perspective, whether you're driving to a train station or in the future a BRT station, or you're changing from one system, Gwinnett or Cobb, into the MARTA system, that you as a rider of the system have the best experience, the most seamless experience that you can. We're very, very proud that, next slide please, we're very proud that we are the first transit authority in the United States to receive our ISO certification for our asset management program. And we're even prouder now. Teresa Ray, who runs that program for us, has just been selected to run a new organization that will be stood up here in the Atlanta area to focus on asset management for transit agencies. We have right now somewhere around 65 or 70,000 items in our asset management program. We're also looking at how to make sure that we have the capacity to grow that as we do the expansion of the system, that we also need to be able to track and take care of all of our assets appropriately within that system. So we expect that number to grow pretty significantly. From the bus side of the house, as you know, you may have heard, there's a lot of conversation in Metro Atlanta about the use of BRT. That's really important on so many levels. We can deliver BRT a whole lot faster than we can deliver most of the other types of transit. So in areas that are underserved or areas that need better service, we can provide that more quickly by implementing that. We are working with our jurisdictional partners to ensure that wherever possible, we can talk with the signals and do some signal preemption work to make sure that the buses are expedited appropriately. There's a lot of communication that's going on. We have stood up a new system to communicate information like schedules, arrivals, etc., for patrons. So just a lot of technology to make sure that we are maximizing the effectiveness of our system. We're also doing a lot of stuff in the back of the house, utilizing the information that's coming from both our bus and rail systems to better inform our patrons, so that in areas where the service is not as frequent and you need to know what the schedule looks like, you get very accurate information by going to our app and looking for information on arrivals. We're looking to do a lot of other coordination with all the jurisdictions to make sure that whatever technology is being deployed locally, that we look for ways to connect with that technology and improve our service. Speaking of improvements, MARTA runs both diesel buses and natural gas buses, but recently was awarded a grant to do a pilot program looking at zero emission buses, electric buses. And so we are right now in the planning process for those to be able to scope out the infrastructure that we need to be able to support those. We'll get 6 buses in the initial pilot, and we need infrastructure for charging both at the bus yard as well as en route. We'll have quick charging capabilities that will drop down and connect with the top of the bus. We're also doing a lot in the area of transit-oriented development. As you drive around Atlanta, you may see some new things that have popped up around some of our stations. One of my favorites is at H.E. Holmes. We've installed quite a few shipping containers that are being used as retail shops and small offices. We're looking now at adding our soccer in the street in the vicinity of, that's called iVillage, in the vicinity of iVillage, to build some synergy and some excitement between the soccer program and the businesses that are located in iVillage. In other locations, we're building some mixed-use we're not, the developers are building mixed-use developments in partnership with MARTA. One that is just about complete now is the one at Edgewood Candler. And we have quite a few that will be coming out this year. We have 7 station locations in federal opportunity zones. And so the board has given our TOD group, our real estate group, permission to go out with a request for proposals for transit-oriented development around those stations. We'll go to the next one. 5 points, one of my favorite subjects these days. I spend a lot of time working on 5 points. So for those who may not be as familiar with our network, 5 points is the heartbeat of the MARTA rail system. It is where the east-west and north-south lines cross. The station has a plaza area that includes an urban garden as well as our soccer in the street pitch. We have a concourse level where in the right season we have our fresh market, we have live entertainment, among other things. And then we have the 2 levels below where we have our rail lines, our east-west and the north-south lines. There's a tremendous desire to not only improve the in-station experience, but to improve our relationship with the community around us by transforming the look and the feel of this 40-year-old station to something that is much more contemporary and perhaps more inviting as a place that is part of the community. We're in the process of completing a feasibility study because it was not clear at the outset that we would be able to deconstruct the concrete canopy. When it was built and there were no rail operations, we could put a giant crane in the middle of the station and build out. Obviously, we have to keep operations at 100%, so that was not viable for the deconstruction. But a lot of the area sits up on bridge structures, which may or may not have been strong enough to hold the cranes. So it's a very intricate process that we're going through to analyze how to deconstruct. Fascinating process. But we have demonstrated that we can, in fact, deconstruct the existing canopy. Now we're also looking at a component that the City of Atlanta is very interested in, which is reconnecting Broad Street. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. But again, it's with a lot of focus on improving rider experience and being more connected and engaged with the community. So the surrounding neighborhoods have a lot of new development that's coming. For those of you familiar with the downtown area, there's a space called the Gulch. It's a parking area between where the 5 Point station is and where the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the State Farm Arena are located. A developer, CIM, has come along and they have acquired the rights to build a project called Centennial Yards, which will be built over a number of years, that will eventually connect us directly to, at street level, directly to the stadium and the arena and the other facilities that are on that side of the Gulch. There's another developer, Newport, who has acquired many of the buildings around South Downtown. At one station south of 5 Points is our Garnett Street station, where there's also a Greyhound facility. And between the 5 Point station and Garnett Street, they are going to be doing a lot of redevelopment, making it a very pedestrian-friendly environment, a lot of street life, a lot of restaurants with street seating, etc. And so with the changes that are coming around us, we wanted to be very sure that we were both well-connected and fit the fabric of what was coming around us. So in looking at the possibilities for the 5 Points area, 5 Point station, we've demonstrated through our feasibility study that we can in fact deconstruct the canopy. And then the City of Atlanta was very interested in exploring the reconnection of Broad Street, which was severed, the section between Marietta Street and Alabama Street, when the station was originally constructed. That section of Broad Street was consumed by the station plaza area. There is interest on MARTA's part to feasibility of reconstructing that street. Use of it yet to be determined, what vehicles or pedestrians or activities would happen on that street. But it would then create two very nice paths for some future development, again, a TOD type project that would be in partnership with MARTA. So we're looking at all of those different features. One of the challenges is we have a beautiful building facade called the Eisman facade that is located in the concourse, between the concourse and platform levels of Five Points Station. It was the facade of a building that sat on the property where the station now exists. And when the station was built, as an homage to its history, the facade of the building was dismantled very carefully and reassembled, and now graces the station. It sits a mere 6 inches below the Broad Street footprint, the Broad Street elevation. And so one of our challenges is to ensure that whatever we decide in terms of reintroducing Broad Street, we do not do anything to harm the Eisman facade, which is quite a beautiful piece that we not only want to keep, but we're going to enhance its presence in the station. And then lastly, our target is to deal with all of the issues and all of the opportunities around this Five Points station and be totally done with our deconstruction and reconstruction, not of the towers, but of what will sit on the property until it's time for the towers to be built. Because the world is coming back to Atlanta. For those of you who were around in the early 90s, everybody talked about the world is coming in 1996, whether we're ready or not, and we were quite ready for them. Well, the world is coming back in 2026 for the World Cup. And so with the pivotal location of 5 Points, our goal is to get through this project. We're going to use the construction manager at risk delivery methodology. So they're working closely with the A&Es through the design process and through early design and delivery packages to ensure that all of the work is accomplished in such a way that we can be ready when the world gets here for the World Cup. There are so many more projects that we're working on. I just want to hit a few more highlights. So we have two kinds of power systems in MARTA on the rail side of the house. We have our traction power system, and that is the power that feeds the third rail that runs our trains, obviously a critical part of our infrastructure. The auxiliary power is all of the electricity needed for everything else that happens at the station. The lights, the fare readers, the vending machines, all the other things that you see at the station that require electricity. Both systems are largely original systems, obviously having been maintained over the years, but technology has changed and it's time for us to upgrade those systems. So we will be starting later this year. We're in design now, but we'll be starting construction later this year and into next year with the first couple of stations for the traction power. And then over the next 8 to 10 years, we'll be replacing the remainder of the systems that are in need of replacement throughout the system. And then alternating with that, we'll be working on the auxiliary power substations as well. Station rehab, I mentioned briefly at the beginning. The 36 stations will, other than 5 Points and Airport, will receive things like new tile where needed, new art. We work very closely with our Artbound program, which is part of our real estate group. So stations that don't have art will probably be seeing some new art projects. We'll be cleaning up or enhancing some of the art that already exists in the stations. A lot of different features at each station will be improved. Track renovation, that's a huge ongoing effort for us. We are now entering or in the fourth program, we call it TR4, Track Replacement 4. The track sees a lot of wear and tear every day. The ties, the ballast, all the different components do wear out over time. And so the authority has, over the years, embarked on different programs to replace different sections of track, switches, different gear that needs to be modernized as we go along. We are about a year or so into the actual implementation of TR4. If you ride the rail system, you will notice from time to time we do something called single tracking. There's a great video on all of MARTA's social media channels that shows a lot about what single tracking is and how it works. But it allows us to keep the system operating even if we have to take a section of track out for a period of time. We do everything we can to minimize the amount of time that the track is out of service. But sometimes, you've got to pull the Band-Aid off and bear with that for a while to make sure that the system is operating well and is as safe as it needs to be. The last project I want to mention is our first BRT project. We are partnered with the City of Atlanta and with the Federal Transit Administration. We received a $12 million Tiger grant for the implementation of this project. The route, which starts kind of south of the old Turner Field area, an area that has not been well served by transit, is going to be the starting point, and then the line will come up in the vicinity of the Georgia State Station and probably in the vicinity of the 5 Point Station before heading back down in that direction. It will connect a lot of people who have not had great transit service with a lot of the new and exciting things that are happening and with access to our rail system directly. We are hoping that we have a lot of the route where we're in exclusive lanes to provide a very high level of service on that route. And the planning is in place. We expect to get environmental clearance in May, and then we'll go into full-blown design and then implementation. That project is scheduled to be operational in 2024. I could talk for hours because we're doing so many exciting things, and I love working on all these interesting different projects. But at this time, I thought I would stop and take some questions.
All right, thanks, Marcia. Looking at the chat on YouTube, we currently do not have any questions, but I'll step up and ask a few.
All righty, happy to answer.
As you are the capital program manager, and you made mention of fare being way down. What relative percentage of fares do you rely upon for these projects in relation to other funding sources, FTA,
That is
or
a great
from other
question.
counties?
So legislatively, our fare box contribution to our program can be is around 35%. So the rest of our funding has to come from other sources. We have the penny sales tax that our jurisdictional partners have approved over the years. We just had the 15th Amendment to that base penny sales tax approved. And as you probably know, 2 of our jurisdictions have approved additional sales tax revenues for the expansion portion of our program. So the City of Atlanta and Clayton County have approved additional sales tax revenue. And then of course the federal government is a huge partner. We have both formula funds that help with some operations, with bus acquisitions, with a variety of those kinds of large dollar projects. And then we have small sources of revenue from advertising and some other small programs that we run that are really not for the purpose of supporting the main activities, the main capital activities, but do make a nice contribution to that program.
Okay. We have a question on the board. A few are starting to pop up now. Are there any streetcar expansions included in this program?
Great question. Yes, there are streetcar expansions. So the Streetcar East and Streetcar West are the first 2 that are in conversation. We are going to start design on Streetcar East probably in the spring of next year. We're always balancing, we like to do everything at the same time, but we have a limited amount of money every year. Our capital budget, which sounds very big, this year is in the range of about $400 million, but we have currently about 170 projects and programs ongoing. So when you spread the $400 million out over everything, it gets to be very challenging, so we have to do a lot of prioritizing. But that Streetcar East project is one of the early streetcar projects that will go into design.
Okay, we have a question related to traction power or substation. Maybe that has related to how the trains are powered.
Okay, so yeah, so the if you ever go out to one of the train stations and you look down, there's a portion of rail that has a cover over most of it. That is our third rail, and there's a room that sits nearby that converts the power that is fed to us by Georgia Power into the power that feeds the third rail. If ever there's an incident on a train, the first thing that has to happen is we have to shut the power off so that we don't accidentally have somebody touch that. The same thing happens when we're doing maintenance on the line. We have to depower or de-energize the third rail. But the traction power substations they're all coming to end of life, the different electrical components. And so it's really important that we begin that replacement program. We do have redundancy in the system, so you can take one out and get your power from one of the adjacent stations. So we do have the ability to keep running the system even when we take a substation offline.
Okay. We have another question, very current question. What's the likelihood of MARTA being shut down?
Okay, great question. So right now we don't think that's going to happen, and obviously things will change as we're directed, but transit is considered an essential service. There are people who have no means of moving around, who have to move around, whether it's for health reasons, if they have to go to the doctor, or if they have a job that's considered an essential job. So for as long as we are allowed, the intent is to keep service running. It is, as I mentioned earlier, we did make a change effective this morning to better protect our bus operators by having patrons enter the back of the bus and stay spread out through the bus. We're keeping up the frequency of service so we don't end up with crowding on the buses. So we see some adjustments coming, but right now I haven't heard of any call for us to stop service. It's just too important to too many people.
Very good. Another question regarding the airspace above the stations, perhaps related to transit-oriented development. Are there any plans of increasing the density or selling that airspace above?
Yeah, so pretty much every station, there is a possibility of doing a transit-oriented development. The nature of the development is going to be different depending on where you are. So there are conversations, RFPs that had gone out over the years, and conversations going on at some of the stations on the north side, north line of MARTA. As I mentioned some of the ones where we've already successfully completed or are at the substantial completion stage. And now we're focusing very heavily, since the federal, in particular, the time is right because of other developments that are happening on the west and south side. But the addition of the federal government's opportunity zones makes it even more attractive to look for transit-oriented developments. We have seven stations with RFPs that will be coming out over this this calendar year, for new TODs.
Okay. Another question: what other types of architectural and engineering support will what MARTA need to successfully deliver these projects?
We're always in need of assistance. We have a great staff here. I have an infrastructure and engineering group with about 60 people on staff. But we're always needing help, either because we need a very specialized type of knowledge that we don't have in-house, or because we have just so much capacity and we need additional support. So just before this webinar, we had our board committee meeting, and 3 of the items on the agenda were a procurement for the A&E services for the 5 Point Station, the A&E services for the Summerhill BRT, Capitol Avenue Summerhill BRT line, and the construction management at risk services for 5 Points. I wouldn't say every month, but almost every month we have some kind of procurement ongoing. In this month's agenda, we also let the board know that we would be procuring systems engineering services as well. I believe next month we'll be going to the board for surveying and subsurface utility engineering services. So it's pretty much an ongoing thing that we're regularly looking for additional support.
All right, more questions continue to roll in. You highlighted a couple of light rail corridors. There's a question specific to the Clifton Corridor light rail.
Okay, yeah, so the Clifton Corridor, we anticipate when that happens, it's going to be probably the most heavily utilized transit corridor because of where it connects and what it's not on the rail line, so a lot of people need that access that don't currently have very good access in that area. It's a very expensive project, and we're looking at different alternatives along with Emory and some of our other partners or jurisdictional partners and others to identify and get approval from the FTA on the actual location of the corridor. There will be a need for additional funding beyond what the sales tax program and our regular capital program can afford to support the development of that project. So there are ongoing conversations about how much additional money needs to be raised and who needs to raise it to make that project a reality. So that is in the pipeline. If anybody's interested, and if you go to the MARTA website, to the section where the board information is located, there is a graphic that shows the proposed schedule for all of the expansion projects, the Clifton Corridor being one of them. Clifton Corridor is still in the planning stages. Its development is a little bit further out, just because of partly because of the dollars that are needed to actually acquire the right of way and do the construction.
All right. Another question, are there discussions with the state to open up the possibility of GDOT funding to go towards transit and rail expansion?
We're always asking people about sharing their money. That's an ongoing conversation. But remember, the motor fuel tax by state law can only go to roads and bridges. So that's not really a viable path. Now, could there be other sources potentially? It's a difficult situation for everybody because the needs for the DOT are pretty significant, as ours are, and so whether they have anything that they can share, only they know if they have not only money available but a means to share that money, again because of the restrictions of dollars.
All right, that at the moment is the current end of the list of questions.
All right.
Any closing thoughts?
Sure. So, I'm excited to be doing this presentation. I'm sad about the circumstances that we can't all be together.
We should be eating great pasta right now.
We should be having great pasta. I was looking forward to my time at Maggiano's. So we'll meet again there someday soon. But it is, I do want to kind of put a pitch out there. It is really important that you not only follow the guidance that you're being given, and certainly, I would say the source for us is largely the CDC. They are the kind of the ground truth for what we should be doing. If you need to go to an extreme to be really careful, Paul and I have been doing this dance of staying far apart as we got all this set up. And MARTA right now has everybody who can work from home teleworking. Our projects are proceeding with our staff being very careful to not be in close proximity. To the extent that our contractors continue to work, we will work with them to make sure that we staff those projects. It is very challenging times. We're not really sure. We're hoping that the legislation goes through that will provide some relief for transit agencies to be able to recover some of the expenses that we have to keep the system running because of the fact that we're an essential service, while our revenues, we know, not only is our fare box revenue going to be down very significantly because ridership is down. Some of our bus riders do ride the train as well, so they will be swiping their fare card at the train station. But we do have a lot of bus riders who only ride the bus, so we won't be collecting any fares from the bus system for the foreseeable future. But remember, another big portion of our revenue stream is sales tax, and we're probably not all shopping as much as we used to. So we expect the sales tax revenues to take a dip as well. MARTA has done a good job over the last many years building up some reserves, so we have a little bit of a cushion. But depending on how prolonged this event is, that may or may not be sufficient, for us. So we're having regular conversations about prioritizing the work that we do. Again, we always have more work than we have dollars. Who doesn't? Every DOT, every transit agency will tell you that. Everybody's always prioritizing, but now we have to work even harder to sharpen that pencil and make sure we get the maximum value out of every dollar we spend and really focus on the must-do projects first.
Okay. As we have about a 45-second lag between what we're doing here and what's showing up on the screen here, a couple of other questions.
Okay,
Happy to
answer them.
We have a question. Any plans of moving into Cobb?
Well, that's up to Cobb. That's really a local jurisdiction issue. For them to join a system, whether it's MARTA or something else, they have to initiate it. They have to vote to support that. And then they get the chance to work with us to figure out what that looks like. So, as you know, Gwinnett had a referendum last year that, for whatever reason, did not pass. I'm personally hoping, because I live in Gwinnett, but also because I think it's greatly needed in Gwinnett, I'm hoping that we will have a referendum on this November's ballot. In my heart of hearts, I believe everybody realizes how important it is now, and I think it will pass at this point in time. And then we'll figure out, what will happen, who will run what the connections will be between the systems. There's no intent for MARTA to take over and run everybody's systems. In many places, you have different operators for different parts of the system, and that's okay. But from the rider's perspective, we all have to be doing things so it appears seamless to the riders. And so that's our goal. But yeah, we'd welcome anybody who wants to come to the party to come join us, because transit is really a big part of the Metro Atlanta future.
Okay. And one last question, we'll cut it off here. Does MARTA anticipate utilizing the design, build, delivery model for any of these upcoming opportunities? You touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
They may have missed it.
Yeah, so we evaluate each project as to which delivery method is the most appropriate. So many of MARTA's projects have been design, bid, build. We are currently using the construction manager at risk for some of our projects. We're looking at all different delivery methods on a case-by-case basis for future projects, including we're kind of in the early research part of P3s for one or more projects. So anything is possible.
All right. Well, thank you, Marcia. Thank you very, very much for putting this together.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
And we will close this out. And I'd like to remind everybody, along with the email information that supplied the link for this webinar, we also have a survey. Please complete the survey to get your PDH hour. I've been noticing on the screen here that we have a sustained 113 members watching remotely. So for everybody in Georgia and beyond who's been watching, thank you so very much for that. That's very encouraging, and I think this will be the springboard to do more of these types of things and leverage our YouTube channel more in the future. And also, stay safe.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.